In a world obsessed with connection, with constant noise and endless demands, what does true solitude even mean? We crave quiet, seek escape, yearn for a simpler existence far from the clamor. But imagine, for a moment, a time and place where the deepest desire for solitude wasn't a personal quest, but a commodity, a performance. Picture 18th century England, an era of opulence and philosophical awakening, where wealthy landowners didn't just admire hermits from afar. They hired them, not for their wisdom, not for their spiritual guidance, but to live as living ornaments in their meticulously crafted gardens. This is the curious, almost absurd, story of the professional hermit. Across civilizations and centuries, the figure of the hermit has captivated humanity. From ancient Eastern ascetics seeking enlightenment in mountain caves to medieval Christian anchorites walled into church cells, solitude has long been intertwined with wisdom, sanctity, and profound introspection. The hermit represented an escape from worldly desires, a path to spiritual purity, or simply a radical independence. They were seen as conduits to a deeper truth, living embodiments of a life unburdened by societal conventions. This fascination laid the groundwork, subtly shaping the desires of those who would later seek to possess a piece of that mystical quietude, even if through a contract. By the 18th century, particularly in England, gardening had transcended mere horticulture. It became an art form, a philosophical statement. The formal, geometric designs of French gardens gave way to the picturesque movement. Inspired by classical landscapes, romantic poetry, and the canvases of artists like Claude Lorraine, these gardens aim to evoke emotions, tell stories, and create an idealized, naturalistic scene. Winding paths, carefully placed trees, artificial ruins, and follies were designed to surprise and delight, guiding visitors through a curated experience that mimicked nature's untamed beauty, yet was meticulously controlled. It was a stage set, waiting for its most eccentric prop. These weren't just pretty parks, they were intellectual playgrounds for the Enlightenment elite. Each vista, every grotto, and all the whimsical follies were laden with symbolic meaning. Patrons sought to recreate pastoral idyls or classical scenes, embedding their estates with literary allusions and moral lessons. It was a display of wealth, taste, and erudition. To stroll through such a garden was to embark on a journey of contemplation, a controlled encounter with beauty, melancholy, and the sublime. But as these elaborate landscapes became more theatrical, the desire for authenticity, for a truly natural element, grew stronger. A living, breathing element that could elevate the garden's philosophical depth. Central to many of these picturesque gardens was the hermitage or grotto. These were artificial caves or rustic dwellings, often adorned with moss, shells, and rough-hewn stones, designed to evoke a sense of ancient mystery and natural seclusion. They serve as places for quiet reflection, philosophical discussion, or simply a cool respite on a summer's day. But what good was a hermit's dwelling without a hermit? The stage was set, the scenery perfected, but the central character was missing. The logical, albeit peculiar, next step for an owner seeking to fully realize their garden's narrative potential was to fill that void. To hire an authentic, flesh-and-blood anchor to their fabricated solitude. This brings us to the astonishing practice of employing a professional hermit. It wasn't about seeking spiritual counsel or practical labor. It was about atmosphere, authenticity, and intellectual cachet. Wealthy patrons, driven by a blend of Enlightenment philosophy and romantic yearning, wanted their gardens to feel truly ancient, truly profound. A living, breathing hermit, often complete with a long beard and a contemplative demeanor, provided the ultimate accent. They were living sculptures, carefully curated to enhance the garden's narrative, to offer a tantalizing glimpse into a life of philosophical detachment, all within the confines of a grand estate. It was a bizarre twist on the pursuit of genuine wisdom. Perhaps the most famous example comes from Charles Hamilton, who advertised in the 1760s for a hermit to live in his garden at Paynes Hill Park. The conditions were extraordinary. The successful applicant had to live in a specially constructed hermitage for 7 years, wear a coarse brown cloak, grow a long beard, communicate with no one, and never cut his hair or nails. He was forbidden from leaving the grounds, and his only companion would be his own thoughts. In return, he would receive a handsome annual salary and regular provisions. It was a contract for profound, enforced solitude, a performance of reclusion for the amusement and philosophical contemplation of his employer and guests. Few lasted long under such unique demands. These hermits were more than mere statues. They were intended to be living embodiments of philosophical ideals. Their presence was meant to evoke feelings of mystery, wisdom, and the passage of time. They were figures of contemplation, a silent challenge to the superficiality of polite society. For the patron, a hermit offered a kind of intellectual bragging right, a unique conversation starter, a symbol of their refined taste and deep understanding of life's profound questions. Guests might catch a fleeting glimpse of the hermit through the trees, a silent, bearded figure lost in thought, adding an ineffable layer of depth and wonder to the garden experience. Yet, the question of their actual internal life remained unseen. The paradox was stark. These were hermits hired to perform solitude. Their authenticity was entirely dependent on maintaining the illusion for their patrons. How genuine could their introspection be when it was part of contract? Did they truly find peace, or were they merely enduring their quirky employment? Most accounts suggest the experiment rarely lasted, often due to the rigorous conditions or the psychological toll of enforced, observed isolation. The gap between the romanticized ideal of the hermit and the reality of a contracted employee was often too vast. It underscored the inherent tension in trying to commodify something as deeply personal and unquantifiable as genuine spiritual solitude. By the early 19th century, the fashion for garden hermits began to wane. Changing aesthetic tastes moved away from the extreme theatricality of the picturesque. The Romantic era, while still valuing wildness and emotion, increasingly celebrated individual genius and raw nature over contrived arrangements. The Industrial Revolution was rapidly transforming society, shifting focus from aristocratic whims to progress and utility. The grand estates continued, but the elaborate philosophical narratives embedded within their gardens, and certainly the peculiar need for a human centerpiece, slowly faded into a historical curiosity. The Enlightenment's rational spirit, ironically, began to view such practices as overly sentimental or even absurd. The peculiar story of the professional garden hermit offers a fascinating lens through which to view human desires. It speaks to our enduring fascination with solitude, authenticity, and the attempt to imbue our surroundings with deeper meaning. It highlights the eternal tension between seeking genuine introspection and presenting a curated image to the world. In an age where digital personas are meticulously crafted and experiences are commodified, perhaps these 18th century hermits aren't so alien after all. They remind us that the human quest for meaning, for a connection to something profound, can take the strangest, most unexpected, and at times, utterly theatrical forms. So, the next time you stroll through a beautifully manicured garden, or perhaps even scroll through a perfectly curated social media feed, take a moment to consider the silent, bearded figures of the past. The professional hermits, living paradoxes, hired to embody an ideal they could rarely truly live. Their story is a whisper from a stranger time, a quirky testament to the lengths humanity will go to in its quest for meaning, for beauty, and for the elusive, often commodified, illusion of solitude. An ancient history that, in its absurdity, reveals something surprisingly timeless about us all.